This is Nothing But That Sports Talk.
Here we go, and welcome to Nothing But That Sports Talk. I'm Rafique Louison alongside Billy. How you doing today?
Doing great, Rafique. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and you know what? The Nets season is coming back after just months following the conclusion of the NBA Finals. It's kind of weird that they were starting the season just 2 months after we crowned a champion, and what do you know? We're getting ready for the start of the season. The Nets, well, they couldn't necessarily draft anybody, but they did manage to get Landry Shamet. How impressive do you think this guy's going to be going into the season coming up?
Yeah, the Nets didn't do too much this offseason. They kind of tweaked around the edges. They added Jeff Green in free agency, and then they upgraded on a few back rotation pieces, and they swapped out Garrett Temple, Janan Musa, and Wilson Chandler, bringing in Landry Shamet, as you mentioned, Bruce Brown, and Jeff Green. So all three of those guys should be on the back end of the rotation, but play pivotal roles for this Nets team going forward. Specifically with Shamet, he's a guy that could shoot the lights out of the ball. Career 40% three-point shooter. He's going to provide spacing for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, along with Joe Harris, and Nets now have two snipers on the wing. So Shamet should be a big boost in that regard. He's a smart player, makes quick decisions, like the perfect complementary piece next to stars.
And it's because of all those details, he could be the X factor that the Nets need, since they were kind of lacking that, like prior to the bubble or even during the NBA bubble. Like, they did a lot better than we thought they were going to do in the NBA bubble.
Yeah, those guys competed. The Nets were shorthanded. It was basically led by Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, and Joe Harris before he ultimately had to leave the bubble due to a death in the family. But LeVert and Allen and Harris, those guys really manned the ship well. They got that group competing throughout the regular season. They had some surprising wins, even their losses. The game against Portland, where Portland had to win to get into the playoffs. Karis LeVert was dueling with Damian Lillard late in that game. That was a fun one to watch, and Nets competed in all those games, which I think boded well for Jacques Vaughn, and he didn't keep the head coaching spot as he was an interim, but he's still on this staff as the lead assistant, the highest paid assistant in the NBA. So the Nets showed how much they valued him and kept him on board to keep some continuity. But yeah, this Nets group with Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, Joe Harris, some of these incumbents, that they really proved their worth so far.
And I can't wait to see how Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving is going to match up with them. Well, we know how good Kyrie Irving is going to pair up with these guys, but the question is, since Kevin Durant hasn't played since the 2019 NBA Finals, like, how big will this year-long impact Kevin Durant's career going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's two aspects to it. Obviously, the injury, how does he rebound from an injury that has been very devastating to players in the past, besides Dominique Wilkins for the most part. And then you have, obviously, he hasn't played in about 18 months, so that's a long layoff for any player. However, Kevin Durant, it almost served him well that the NBA season went into a bubble format. He wasn't going to come back for that. So he had this entire offseason now. And a lot of players, when they come back from injury, they have to jump straight from rehabbing to playing. And that's a tough jump to make. Whereas Durant, he kind of had a chance to be a player again, as he said, and got a chance to get back in the swing of things and have a normal offseason where he wasn't necessarily rehabbing. And he was just preparing for a season in terms of getting his win back, playing a lot of 5-on-5, a lot of scrimmages. So I think Durant's coming into the season as a healthy player. He's coming to the season as a normal player. And without a lot of normalcy over the last 18 months with COVID and him just being out for 18 months, I mean, that's something to look forward to.
And the fun part about this Nets roster coming up is most of these starting five and bench warmers in the higher ups, they've all had 50-point games. They all had game-winning shots prior to Kevin Durant being able to play. So that's going to be big for Brooklyn coming in. They know how to space the floor, and not to mention you're going to be coached by Steve Nash, who actually knows how to play the 7-second offense that he was taught under Mike D'Antoni. And he's also, in the coaching staff, they're just basically offensive loaded. But what do you think about Steve Nash's coaching, and how will him, along with the coaching staff, impact the Nets offense coming up?
Yeah, that's a good point, Rafique. You mentioned the Nets have a lot of guys that have had a chance to be the man at different points in their careers, and that's going to bode well going forward. I mean, you got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They speak for themselves, their resumes, and what they've accomplished. Then you have Karis LeVert, who got to be the man in the bubble. He's been the man at different points for the Nets in the season. He's hit game winners before. Spencer Dinwiddie, the same thing with him. LeVert and Dinwiddie are kind of on that cusp, fringe all-star level. And then you have Durant and Irving. We know how great they are. So the Nets have a lot of options, guys that know how to make plays with the ball in their hands. And I think Steve Nash, and with Mike D'Antoni as kind of the offensive coordinator, bringing that Phoenix Suns 7 seconds or less type of offense back, I think it'll be a little different. Maybe it'll be a little bit slower, but certain principles will be the same. I think those are the perfect minds to make it all work. Multiple ball handlers and kind of get these guys to mesh the right way.
Yeah, and that match, those stuff is going to be important, especially when you're starting the season off against the Golden State Warriors team led by Stephen Curry, and Klay Thompson's out for the season. And also you got later on this week, you got a Christmas Day matchup against the Boston Celtics. Like, what went through your mind seeing those matchups coming up?
I mean, those are great ones. I think a lot of Nets fans were hoping for those two matchups, whether it was for Christmas, opening night, early in the season. I mean, you get Kevin Durant playing against his former team, which is going to be box office right there, even without Klay Thompson. You get Steph Curry back, as he missed most of last season too. Steph Curry and Kevin Durant opening the NBA slate. That's fantastic. In Brooklyn, KD's first game for the Nets in Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving back now. Draymond Green's there, so you're going to have Draymond and KD, that kind of little wrinkle into things. And then you get Kyrie Irving going back to Boston for the first time since coming to the Nets. So that's definitely an interesting wrinkle as well.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that we get a sense of how well they're going to match up against the Boston Celtics team that literally got a taste of Bam Adebayo and the buzzer in Game 1 of what eventually turned out to be a series loss against the Miami Heat. And we actually get to see how Kevin Durant's going to match up against teams like that alongside against teams against the Miami Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving playing the full season.
Yeah, I mean, those are the teams the Nets are trying to match up with, right? I mean, their eyes are on a championship, and to get to that level, you're going to have to beat all these top teams, whether it's the Lakers eventually in the finals or the Clippers. But focused, honestly, on the Eastern Conference at this point, I think the Nets stack up well. I mean, you got the Bucks with Giannis. That's probably the team that if things click for them, if Drew Holiday can be the addition that they need, the team that might give the Nets the most trouble. Then you have the Heat. They have the experience. They play hard. I think they're a little short, especially against the Nets in terms of just star power and firepower in a series. But they're a competitive team. They play well. They're well coached. So they'll be tough. And then you have the Sixers. If they can click things with Doc Rivers now there, they got a ton of talent. They got a ton of size. Daryl Morey's done a good job adding some different pieces like Seth Curry and Danny Green to provide more shooting for that team. The Celtics are always going to be tough, even with losing Gordon Hayward and Kemba Walker starting off a little bit injured. But I expect another leap from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So this is a lot better Eastern Conference than we've seen in past years. And it's going to be a dogfight to get out of it. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at the Nets, they have the best duo in the conference. And if KD and Kyrie are healthy on the floor in the playoffs, and the players that we come to know them as are anywhere close to that level, I think their sheer talent and the rest of the pieces that the Nets have, they have pretty good depth. I think they'll be enough to get them to the finals at least.
Yeah, or a conference finals and run into the Miami Heat. And we all saw how good the Miami Heat were. Nobody really expected them to get as far as they did. But sticking on the subject of the Brooklyn Nets, assuming that KD and Kyrie are not playing as well as they need to, which of the star players have to step up in order to hold their own in close games when KD or Kyrie Irving are having off nights?
I don't think there'll be too many off nights. As long as those guys are on the floor, I think they'll be able to score the ball at will. But like I mentioned, you have Karis LeVert, you have Spencer Dinwiddie, two guys that have been there before, capable of handling a primary or secondary scoring role. So they could step up there when those guys are not having their best nights, or even if those guys are sitting out, because I think the Nets will do some load managing with Kevin Durant specifically, Kyrie Irving a little bit because he's had some injuries in the past. For the Nets, it's about getting to the playoffs. So they're going to want to keep these guys healthy, rely on guys like LeVert and Dinwiddie. Then you got guys like Joe Harris, Landry Shamet, as I mentioned. Joe Harris is now the third highest paid net. So the Nets value him very much. He's one of the best shooters in the league. He's going to get a lot of open looks playing next to KD and Kyrie. So I expect Harris to have a big year. And then you got the two centers, DeAndre Jordan and Jared Allen. They're going to get a lot of open dunks with all the double teams that Kyrie and Karis and Spencer and KD are going to draw. So the Nets got a lot of guys. They're one of the deepest teams in the league. They have two of the best players in the league as a duo. I think they have the second best duo in the league behind LeBron and AD. So the Nets got a lot of talent on this team. It's about how it's going to fit and if they can buy in on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and with all those stuff that you just said, let's just mention, like, how many wins you think the Brooklyn Nets are going to get and how high of a seed they're going to get?
Well, it's tough because it's a 72-game season now, so I got to do a little quick math. But I think they'll be in the 45 to 50 win range, I would say, in that 72-game season. I think they're going to be the third seed. I think anywhere in the top three seeds, I wouldn't be surprised. I could see them even falling as far as 5 if they do a lot of load managing, start off slow. So like I said, I don't think the regular season really matters. If this Nets team's healthy going into playoffs, even if Kyrie dealt with some injuries, KD was resting quite a bit, and they come in as a 5th or a 6th seed, no one's going to want to play them anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter what that regular season record was. If those guys are healthy going into the playoffs, I think that's when the Nets money is going to be made, and no one's going to want to play that team.
Yeah, nobody wants to play the Brooklyn Nets, not even the Milwaukee Bucks. And we saw how good they were getting the win against the Milwaukee Bucks in the bubble where they didn't have any of their star player. That was literally surprising.
The Bucks you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bucks, I mean, they've run into a few years now in the playoffs, just Giannis's shortcomings in terms of being a half-court creator, a half-court scorer late in the game. That hurts them. And he has Chris Middleton as the second option. He took over a big load last season offensively. But it feels like they're a piece away. I thought they were going to go after a guy like Chris Paul maybe this offseason. That didn't come to fruition. They got Drew Holiday, and Drew Holiday's a good player. Very good on the defensive end. So they got a really locked down defensive unit now with Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis. Brook Lopez was a good defensive center last season. So defensively, they should be all right. But I still have questions as if they've fixed that problem that they had. I mean, Giannis, I don't think overnight is going to become now a reliable half-court scorer in crunch time. So Drew Holiday is really not that type of player. He's a great two-way player, but he's not that guy you're going to say, get me a bucket at the end of the game. Whereas when you look at a team like the Nets, they got Kyrie and KD, and even Karras and Spencer are more of those one-on-one scoring types than Drew Holiday is. So I still have questions about the Bucks. I think they've improved, but I think ultimately it's going to come down to with the roster that they have, it's going to come down to Giannis making that leap and be able to figure it out late in the playoffs.
Well, playing an NBA game where there's no fans or limited fans, we all know how unpredictable the game could be coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something that we saw a little bit of it in the bubble. Obviously, there were no fans there, but that was a different atmosphere. They had a lot of different things playing on the scoreboard and music, which I think is supposed to be the same back in the home arenas. But these teams are back home now, and they're going to be traveling from city to city, playing in different venues, not having the comfortability of being in the same spot for the entire time. So they'll have to get used to playing in empty venues around the country. Certain arenas might actually get fans at some points based on the COVID numbers and state protocol. But yeah, it's going to be different. We're going to see what happens. A lot of players have said playing in the bubble was a lot easier without all the distractions, not having fans, not really having as much media, not having to travel. So I think that will be similar this year, but maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, given the need to travel.
And not having bad teams like the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks and also the Charlotte Hornets being in the bubble as well made it very easier to just conclude the season as fast as you can to get ready for this one. And there were a lot of questions about whether or not the season should start in December or January. But do you always predict that the December start was the best move for the NBA?
Yeah, financially, it just there was no other option. I forget the number off the top of my head now, but it was a massive number in the hundreds of millions that the NBA would have lost had they started even on Martin Luther King Day, January 21st. Just starting at a month earlier for Christmas, all the TV partners, they wanted the Christmas games. That's making the NBA so much more money, and it's just good for the health of the league going forward.
And that's important. But before we get back to talking today's sports, let's just get to know your career in the journalism field. Like, start off from like why you decided to get into journalism and pick Fordham University as your destination to start.
So I actually was not a journalism major. I worked at WFUV for all 4 years, eventually as the assistant sports manager for WFUV as a senior. But part of why I liked Fordham was that I could do both. I could do those journalism, broadcasting type things, reporting type things with WFUV, but I was actually an accounting and finance major while I was at Fordham. So I got a chance to do both. As of now, I'm in law school in addition to covering the Nets. So taking that next step in terms of getting into sports business type things, potentially sports agency. So that's the path I'm on right now, continuing covering the Nets. Love doing that. And yeah, that's where I'm going right now.
What are some of your favorite parts about working at WFUV for the broadcasting perspective and covering the Nets and stuff?
Yeah, I think coming in for me at 17 years old, FUV had a little bit of a late birthday. I didn't turn 18 until October of my freshman year. At that age, getting to start doing real applicable work to the field of broadcasting and reporting. And shortly after that, in the spring of that year, I got a chance to do my first beat reporting, which I started out for NYCFC, the MLS, the Yankee Stadium. And for me, growing up as a Yankee fan, that was great, getting a chance to be in Yankee Stadium and in the press box and experience all that. I wasn't the Yankees yet, and the Yankees was the goal for me to get to, but I got to experience it with NYCFC and the MLS. Great experience there, and I got a chance to do so many great things, beat reporting, which was my favorite thing to do while I was there, just being in the professional setting and being around professional players. That was great for me. Eventually did get to do the Yankees as a junior. So that was a great experience, but so many great memories at FUV, from as I said, the beat reporting, to hosting one-on-one was a great time, back and forth with our teammates at FUV. I mean, so much stuff, calling basketball games, calling baseball games, football games. It was endless, just an incredible experience and something that most people don't get the opportunity to do at such a young age.
That is incredible. And when I met you at UV, you really knew what you were doing. You were on top of your game. I mean, working with Raphael, doing all the stuff that you were doing play for basketball and baseball. Like before you met me in Fordham, like what were some of your favorite games that you covered during your time at UV?
Well, I appreciate that compliment. I think that's just the FUV way, right? I didn't know anything when I came in as a freshman. I had a familiarity, I guess, with sports talk radio from being a fan growing up, listening to all the guys on ESPN, WFAN. But I didn't know too much. And you learn from the upperclassmen, you learn from guys like Bob Aarons. And just each class continues to get older and they teach the younger kids. So you just pass it on from generation to generation. And that's why WFUV is so great. My favorite games, you're talking about professionally or Fordham games?
Professionally.
Specific games. Playoff games are always great. I had an opportunity to cover the Yankees 2018 playoff run, I think it was, when they lost to the Red Sox in the ALDS, also the wild card game against the A's. Getting to play the Red Sox for the first time in a playoff series since 2004, that was great to be a part of. Yankees unfortunately lost in 4 games, but it was still a great experience to be there. Also got to do the Brooklyn Nets first round playoff series against the Sixers last season, or 2 seasons ago now. And that was a rowdy crowd. That was a great experience there. And then I got to do the MLB All-Star game in Miami in 2017. That was tremendous. I did the U.S. Open 3 straight years, got to host the show live from the U.S. Open for all of those years, or 2 of the 3 years, I should say. So many great experiences. I can't even name them all off the top of my head right now. I kind of got a chance to do a lot of things while I was there, pretty much every sport. So have a lot of experiences and memories to look back on fondly.
Yeah, and not to mention you have a lot of amazing connections during your whole time. I mean, I know you also had a lot of amazing internships when you were at WFUV and Fordham University. Why don't you talk about the internship experience and what was it like for you?
I got an opportunity to intern at Alone Journalism Broadcasting. I got an opportunity to intern at Westwood One. It was a sophomore at the time, I believe. Or it might have been my winter of my junior year, I believe. And yeah, that was a great experience. Not exactly what I wanted to do. It was more in terms of production side of things, learning the board and all of that, but great people over there. And I think to really succeed in a broadcasting journalism field, you have to know how to do it all. I mean, you can't be an on-air talent that has no idea how things work behind the glass. You have to kind of at least have a working knowledge of what it takes back there and what the producers are going through, just to be able to have an open line of communication and everything. You got to know how to do it all. So that was a great experience for me in terms of learning that, and one I definitely look back fondly.
Wow. And that is how you got to get to where you are right now. Look, you're a reporter for the Nets Daily. What you love about being a writer and reporter for the Nets Daily publication?
Similar to what it was when I was in college at Fordham. I love being around the team. I love being in a professional setting. I feel like I have a unique perspective and a unique opinion on certain things. So I like having the platform to be able to display that. And Nets Daily is a respected publication. So yeah, just honestly, it's a great experience, and it's just continue to add to the resume of different things I've had an opportunity to do. And every experience you get, just take everything you can from it, because every little thing you do, you can take something from it and better yourself going forward.
What advice do you have for the younger Fordham students and the students that comes after you?
I think when you come in as a freshman, just show a real interest in doing as much as possible and volunteering to do everything. So, and if you don't see yourself on the staff assignments assigned to do something, or you haven't been called upon to do much, make sure you get your voice heard. Talk to Bobby Chaffardini or whoever's in charge, or one of the assistant or sports directors at the time. Look at come in contact with them and make sure you tell them about how much you want to do, and just show that interest. And from the beginning, I mean, a lot of people come in, they want to do broadcasting, they want to be on air. Some people say, I only want to do producing, I only want to do beat reporting. Keep an open mind, learn how to do it all of it, as I mentioned, because you kind of got to have a little bit of a feel in doing all of it. And if you have a good feel for everything, you'll get more opportunities, and just generally speaking, you'll be more versatile and then therefore more valuable.
And that's what it's all about when you're trying to get into the field of journalism, sportscasting, and the media field, because as I was told, it was a tough field to get into, especially when you're doing law school.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. It's one of the more competitive fields. This is not the best time, obviously, for getting jobs, given COVID and everything. It's unfortunate. But I mean, you just got to keep plugging away. And I think one good thing about COVID and all this stuff, it gives people an opportunity to do personal projects, whether it's podcasting like this or different content creation avenues, whether it's live streaming. I did a live stream the other day, different things of that nature that you have an opportunity to do. And people are home for the most part. So if you put a podcast out, if you put a live stream out, any sort of content, people are starving for sports content, and especially just starving for any content. People are home and they're bored during quarantine and during COVID. So just put as much out there as you can. You never know who's going to see it, when they're going to see it, and you just got to hope for the best. Keep plugging away.
And that's what it's all about. Like when you sit at home and you can't really get a full-time job, you have to create your own opportunities. I was told that by Jenna, who was like a special guest a long time ago, and that's what I'm really doing up until this point. Like I'm creating content. I'm interviewing people like you that actually know the game, and whether it's a sports fan or a sports professional or anybody, like you have to get those interview reps in order to be consistent. So when COVID is over and there's more jobs open, you could actually have enough to get your foot in the door, even if it's not guaranteed.
Yep. Continue working hard, continue to build your Rolodex of different connections, and you never know what door's going to open for you if you just keep working at it, and one day something's going to break for you.
Yeah, that's true. But let's just get to the subject about talking a little bit more New York sports, which is the New York Giants. Like, do you think the New York Giants have a chance to win the NFC East, given the circumstances in which, because, bad division, all that?
I think you'd have to say they do at this point, Rafique. I mean, they're in first place. They're only 4-7, but they're in first place at the moment. They have a little bit of a tougher schedule than a couple of the teams in their division, and Daniel Jones is a little beat up right now, which doesn't help. But this kind of comes at a decent time, at least, because they're playing Seattle, they're playing Arizona, two tough games, two games I didn't expect them to win, and I still think they can win the division if they drop them both. For me, it's going to come down to Week 17 against Dallas at MetLife Stadium. I think the Giants win that game. They're going to be representing the NFC East in the playoffs, but that's what I see it coming down to, and they have as good a chance as anybody right now, and I think they're the best team in that division. They've been peaking at the right time. Joe Judge has that team playing hard, playing disciplined football. The defensive side of the ball, that's been a really good defense all year. They have a number of guys who have been making a bid for a Pro Bowl nod, so continue on the offensive side to try and put things together, squeak out some points, get Daniel Jones healthy. Obviously, that's the most important. And this team might get an unexpected playoff berth. Who knows? Some people have spoken about how it might ruin their draft pick, and it's bad for them long term. For me, this team has been bad for so long that unless they were going to get Trevor Lawrence, which it was obvious after a couple games that they were too good for that, that it makes sense for this team to just continue to build on what they're doing, build this culture, and a culture comes from winning at the end of the day. So to get these wins and to reward these guys and the work that they're putting in, show them that it's paying off in terms of wins and losses, I think that's a big step for this group. And Joe Judge, I'm definitely happy with how he's performed so far.
And up until the injury, Donald Jones has really turned the franchise around. Well, or should I say he kept them in the postseason hunts. And it's really unexpected because nobody really expected the Giants to even be in discussions for the playoffs. But since they are, you got to give them credit where credit's due. I mean, they managed to beat the Washington football team. And even then, they were having a tough time closing out close games and making the big plays to win. They couldn't even beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because, they were like a 2-point conversion short. I mean, in most of the games, minus the blowout loss to the 49ers, the Giants gave it their all up until the 3-game winning streak where they defeated the football team from Washington, the Philadelphia Eagles, and recently the Cincinnati Bengals. They had to fight and pull out the big defensive plays to get to this point. But in your mind, which wins do you think was more beneficial for the Giants' playoff hunt up until this point?
You're going to make me pull up the schedule. Obviously, the last one with the Bengals. I mean, the Giants finally had an opportunity there to kind of put their foot down and make a statement in that division and really take over the first place spot. They've kind of been hanging in there. And last week was really the first time where people really expected them to win, to this point, they've had a win here, win there. Not much was expected of them. People weren't really watching their games. But coming into the last week against the Bengals, Joe Burrow was out. That's a game the Giants are expected to win, a game they have to win. And that's a different level of pressure. They had 1-2 in a row at that point. But to put 3 wins in a row together, win a game that you're supposed to win with some pressure, that's a big step for this group. They didn't play great. Obviously giving off the kickoff return early in the game kind of put them behind the ball a little bit there. Daniel Jones getting hurt. But they pulled out a win. It's about wins and losses in this league. Doesn't matter how it happens. Giants lost a ton of close games throughout this season. As you mentioned, the 49ers loss was really the only one that was a blowout. And no one really cares if you lose by 2 or you lose by 45. So for them to get wins and losses, get some wins, 3 in a row now, and continue to build this forward. Seattle's going to be a tough game this week, but this team's trending in the right direction.
And the only thing they need to work on now is special team defense. Because, look, in the win against Cincinnati, after taking a 7-0 lead, they gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown.
Yeah, that's got to be frustrating for Joe Judge. He's a special teams coach by trade, coming from the Patriots. And the Giants special teams have been pretty solid throughout this season. But against the Bengals last week, it wasn't good. It gave up that 100-plus yard kick return early in the game. And then they gave up a big punt return at the end, which I thought was going to bite them. But they ultimately forced that turnover late in the game, and they held that win. But you got to tighten up on all 3 phases of the football to be a good team and to be a team that makes the playoffs. So the Giants are trending in the right direction, though. As I said, I think this is a team that you can only really take positives from at this point.
Yeah, you really can. And Donald Jones is going to be a huge factor, especially when he comes back from injury. But assuming Donald Jones doesn't play this week, which quarterback would you start if you was the coach?
Well, Colt McCoy, he came in last week. He's an experienced veteran in the NFL. He's the Giants' backup. They've been running with 2 quarterbacks for most of the season. I believe they're adding Alex Tanney to be the backup now if Daniel Jones cannot go on Sunday. They have not ruled him out yet, but it's looking doubtful. Colt McCoy is going to be the guy they'll start, though, in that case.
Colt McCoy hasn't won a start since 2014. So it's going to be complicated for Colt McCoy to compete against the highly experienced quarterback in Russell Wilson, who's been to 2 Super Bowls and actually knows what it's like to put together a winning team for the Seattle Seahawks. And, well, you don't have to worry about fans in Seattle, but you do have to worry about the fact that you're playing in their field. So, in a way, it's still going to be tough to win.
Yeah, listen, you can never rule a game as a win or a loss before it's played on the field. But, going into this week, with or without Daniel Jones, it was going to be a tough game for the Giants to win flying cross-country against an experienced team like the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. So, if Daniel Jones can't go, let him heal up, let him get ready for the next couple of weeks, because that's where this division is really going to be won or lost. Giants have won 3 in a row. They're playing a tough team cross-country, as I mentioned. This is not a game that you expect the Giants to win. If they win it, hey, then everything's coming up gold for them lately, and they got all the luck in the world.
And we can't ignore the fact that they have to play the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson, especially when he plays. That's another tough matchup for them. Oh, and let's not forget the Cleveland Browns, who's having a much improved season. So they have a tough schedule in their hands.
Yeah, they got Seattle, Arizona, Baltimore, as you mentioned. Those, if you can win one game there, that'd be surprising. I think they could still win the division if they drop all those 3. I think when you look at it, they might have to beat Cleveland and Dallas in that case. Potentially, if they can beat Dallas alone, I think that might be a little too short, but they're going to have to probably win 2 out of these 5 going forward. Dallas is a must because it's a division game. It determines tiebreakers and other things of that nature, but they're going to have to win 1 out of the 4 likely of Seattle, Arizona, Baltimore, and Cleveland. I think that game against Baker Mayfield and the Browns, that's the game right there. A team like the Browns that hasn't made the playoffs in a very long time. That's the game there where all the pressure on the Browns to clinch a playoff spot. They got to win, keep up with the wild card hunt, and they choked that game away to a hard-playing Giants. I could see that happening for real.
Yeah, and let's not forget, most of the wins for the Cleveland Browns have been against losing teams or not really great teams throughout the season. But we can't ignore the fact that the Cleveland Browns are improving. Lamar Jackson is going to continue to be the future of the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL, especially when you're competing against, even though they did lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers last night, you can't ignore the fact that Lamar Jackson is the future for the Baltimore Ravens. Since we're talking about them right now, let's just get your impression about them this season.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch too many Ravens games, but I know Lamar hasn't had as great of a season as he has in the past. I think he's still trying to prove he's in that top tier of NFL quarterbacks in my mind. I think you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's a tier above Lamar Jackson. Even Deshaun Watson, I think he's a tier above Lamar Jackson as well. There's a few guys like that. Russell Wilson as well. So Lamar is a little inconsistent from time to time, still a little inconsistent throwing the football, but there's no doubt he's that franchise quarterback for that team. And the Ravens are a tough team no matter who they play.
Yeah, even against the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. But speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, like, how long do you think this undefeated streak for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to go? Do you see them going undefeated going to the playoffs, or will they lose at least once or a couple of games?
I haven't had a chance to look at their upcoming schedule, but I know they've had a very soft schedule to this point. They really don't have too many impressive wins in that 11-0. I know from watching week 1 very intently against the Giants started off really poorly. I mean, they didn't really dominate the Giants. It was a close enough game. The Steelers are a good team, don't get me wrong, but they're not an undefeated team. They're not going to finish the season undefeated, in my opinion. This is not an 11-0 team where you look at and say, if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, it's going to be an upset. I don't even think they're the favorites in the AFC at this point. So, to me, 11-0 is great for them. They're winning the games that are on the schedule for them, but I don't view them as the best team in the AFC.
Yeah, you can never rule out the teams ahead of you in the schedule when you're undefeated. Like, 11-0 is impressive, but that does not guarantee you a Super Bowl win. I mean, we saw what happened with the 2015 Carolina Panthers when they went undefeated, or up until they lost that one game, and they couldn't get the job done. So this year's Pittsburgh Steelers is no exception, or it's a potential chance to not be an exception.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to go undefeated. I don't think it's necessarily necessary for them either. They want to get in the playoffs healthy, especially Big Ben, keep him healthy. And then the real season really starts for a team like that come playoff time.
That's also true. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about the New York Jets, like how disastrous the New York Jets have been all season. Like, is it good that they're 0-11 because of Trevor Lawrence, or is it bad that they're 0-11 because it literally showed how terrible Sam Darnold quarterback is going to be, and how long will it take for him to be one of the most dominant quarterbacks later in his career?
Yeah, it's never good to be 0-11. That's embarrassing for the coach, the front office, all the players, and there's going to be a lot of people within the Jets organization looking for a job after this season, namely Adam Gase. I think Sam Darnold's done there. I'm surprised personally. I didn't think he was necessarily going to be elite off the bat. I had confidence in him being a really good player long term, and he hasn't had a lot of help with the Jets. They haven't had a lot of talent around him. He's also missed way too many games for a starting quarterback to this point. But I think for the Jets, they're a bad team, and if you're going to be bad, why not be really, really bad? And Trevor Lawrence, he's the cherry on top at the end of this really, really bad season. So hopefully they get to that point and they could get Trevor Lawrence and he could be a good player. But I mean, you can only keep bringing in top draft pick quarterbacks over and over again for so long. You have to surround them with talent. In my opinion, the best way to build a team is to build everything else up first, the offensive line, the skill position, the defense, and then add a quarterback later. The Jets, I think, are going to take another quarterback again with a very bad roster. So we'll see how that works out. But I think Trevor Lawrence is the guy. If you're at number one, you got to take that pick. Sam Darnold, I think he'll be playing somewhere else next year. I think it's going to be with either maybe the Colts or the Steelers. And yeah, I think it's unfortunate what's happened with Sam Darnold because I had a lot of faith in him potentially, but that Jets organization is just a wreck. It really starts from the top, from ownership down, getting the right people in place, and I don't think they have that at this point.
And it's going to take a lot of development for the New York Jets. Like, they have a lot of flushing out to do. I mean, there are a lot. I've seen seasons for the New York Jets where they have the running back and wide receiver weapons, but the quarterback is just not in sync with them. And you have to be in sync both on the passing offense and the rushing offense in order to put up a lot of wins. And we see the Jets be competitive in certain games. Like, they had competitive games against Denver, they choke. They've had competitive games against the Buffalo Bills, they choke. Not to mention they choke against the New England Patriots, even with Cam Newton as a quarterback. So you can't really figure out the Jets offense at this point. You really can't.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have enough talent at the end of the day. But like you mentioned, it's tough to get any kind of continuity or chemistry when guys are in and out of the lineup. Started the season with Le'Veon Bell, traded him shortly after. Now they're relying on a very old Frank Gore. And then Denzel Mims, he missed most of the season. He came back a little bit later. Sam Darnold was in and out of the lineup. Joe Flacco was starting games. So, I mean, they have no sort of consistency with people in and out of that lineup. And it's just been a tough season for the Jets. But first things first, they don't have the right coaching in place. I'm not sure if they have the right general manager in place. And they got to add a lot more talent.
And since we're in the last month of the season, do you see the Jets sneaking in at least 1 or 2 victories before the season's all said and done?
Again, I haven't had a chance to look at their schedule. It's tough. Listen, betting odds, I think, would say maybe they'll get a win over the next 5 games just because it's very rare that a team goes winless in the NFL. And I don't know, but the Jets are one of the worst teams I've seen in a long time. They don't have a lot of talent at all. It's definitely possible. I think a lot of those guys aren't really playing for Adam Gase anymore. Everyone knows he's a lame duck at this point. So, listen, it could happen. I'm rooting for Jets fans that it doesn't happen because that's really embarrassing. But at the end of the day, the goal for the Jets at the end of the season is to be the worst team and get Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. On to another team that's basically worse, the New York Knicks. I mean, they did do a good job with the Obi Toppin drafted pick, though. Like, what are your impressions about that for what you've seen?
Yeah, I think Obi Toppin's the most NBA-ready player in the NBA draft. I think he's going to come in and he might be the best scorer off the bat. I'm not sure if he's going to have the right minutes, though. I was under the assumption that the Knicks wanted to trade Julius Randle this offseason. That hasn't come to fruition to this point. And I'm not sure what that means for Obi Toppin now because I don't think he's playing much of the 3. If they play some of Randle at the 5, maybe, but they just signed Nerlens Noel. They already have Mitchell Robinson. So I'm not sure that Toppin's going to get as many minutes as I originally thought he would. But I really like Obi Toppin's game. He actually reminds me a little bit of Amari Stoudemire. I don't think he's going to be that peak of player. Amari came out of high school and looked like that, whereas Toppin was a 4-year college player. But Toppin has some similarities. I think he's going to be a good player. He's a New York kid. Seems to say all the right things, have a good head on his shoulders. So I think Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks, they got a good young piece to build with there.
Yeah, the New York Knicks, I can see them going in the right direction because they got Tom Thibodeau as a coach. You picked out the Obi Toppin draft pick. I mean, and also RJ Barrett might have a much developed year. It's just, I think the New York Knicks, they're trending in the right direction, just slightly.
We'll see. Everything looks good before the ball tips off to start the season. So, I mean, at some point, the Knicks we thought they were doing some things last offseason too. Didn't make any strides really for the most part. They've been lingering in that 5 to 10 range of the lottery for a very long time now. So that they kind of got to make some headway now and win some games. And Thibodeau's the right coach for them, I think. He'll, if nothing else, instill a culture, instill a style of play where I think the Knicks have lacked for years now. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to developing those young players. The Knicks, as bad as they've been with drafting, I think they've been just as bad at developing their own talent over the last few years. So they have some new guys in there. Kenny Payne came over from Kentucky. Other coaches involved there now. They kind of changed the whole slate. So you hope those guys can help develop RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, and Kevin Knox, who I really like his talent coming out of Kentucky, but he's just stalled completely as a Knick. So they got some young players. They got a lot of young players. They're going to have to try and develop these guys.
Yeah. And with that, like, how many wins you see the New York Knicks? I mean, it's probably going to be too early to tell until the ball tips off, but how many wins do you see the Knicks getting in terms of, like, from a developer standpoint compared to last season, which was literally abrupted due to the global pandemic?
I would say on a normal 82-game slate, 25 to 30 wins. I'm not really doing proportions right in my head right now, but whatever that equates to on a 72-game season, I guess somewhere from maybe 22 to 27 wins in a 72-game season. So I think they're going to be a non-playoff team once again. For them, try and get into that 10-team playoff because the NBA, I'm not sure if you've heard, this season they are having 10 teams. So not into the playoffs, but you get to get in the play-in, similar to the bubble last year. So if the Knicks can be among that top 10, put themselves with a chance to play in that play-in, that'll be fun for their fans. It'll be a good experience for the young players. And then who knows, maybe they sneak into the playoffs. But that should be the goal for the Knicks this season. They got to continue to grind away. And at some point, you're going to have to see some wins on the board.
Well, I am aware of the play-in tournament, and I can see the Knicks at least just slightly missing the playoffs, or by virtue of the play-in tournaments. But if they do make the play-in tournament, they'll at least get some playoff games or a chance at getting some playoff games because there's more. You're basically adding more teams with the play-in tournaments.
Yeah, it'll be a good experience for the young players. I think that's definitely the goal for them.
But let's be honest, they're not really getting nowhere. And another team that's not really getting nowhere, we have to touch up on the Wizards and Rockets trade. Like, what went through your mind when you saw that go down?
Well, we heard a rumor about it a couple of weeks ago around the start of free agency, that period of time where the Wizards and Rockets had spoken about swapping Westbrook and Wall, two overpaid point guards, but both are still productive. Wall, we haven't seen him in 2 years, but he should still be a productive player, even if he's not the same player. For this, I think it's about appeasing the two stars of those two teams, where it's James Harden and Bradley Beal. I think Russell Westbrook gives the Wizards a better chance of winning. There's less questions about his health. He's more durable. I think he's a better player at this point than John Wall. Bradley Beal with him, and Scott Brooks, who coached Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City, there's some familiarity there. I think they're going to be a team that makes the playoffs now in the Eastern Conference. Then when you look at the Rockets, Westbrook wanted to move on. I think he and Harden decided that it wasn't going to work between them, although they still get along on a personal standpoint. Adrian Wojnarowski reported today that James Harden preferred John Wall to Russell Westbrook. So I think that's a move by the Rockets to try and appease James Harden and keep him here in Houston long term. I'm not sure it's going to work out. Wall hasn't played in 2 years. DeMarcus Cousins is coming off Achilles and an ACL injury back-to-back. They're relying on a lot of injury-prone players there, along with Harden. Then you got PJ Tucker getting up in age. Eric Gordon wasn't good last year. They signed Christian Wood, should be a good piece, but they lost Robert Covington. So the Rockets are doing a lot of towing the line, trying to stay competitive while moving pieces around to appease James Harden. Ultimately, I think they're going to have to move him. But as of now, it seems like they're content going into the season with him and trying winning him over with a competitive roster.
Yeah, and up until now, the problem with James Harden isn't really just he can't win a championship, but it's just the fact that you're having a tough time getting past like the elite teams with the Golden State Warriors, but when they were on top of the game, and the Los Angeles Lakers, and minus the San Antonio Spurs in 2017. And it's mainly because of the type of teammates that James Harden get. I mean, you had Dwight Howard that didn't work out. You had Chris Paul that didn't work out. You had Russell Westbrook that didn't work out. And now you're going to have an injury-prone John Wall teaming up with you this season coming up. Like, the system is going to be tough to put together, but I'm sure if John Wall and James Harden can work together on the court, they might have a deep run at it. I could see him being like a middle seed team at best.
Yeah, I think, as long as James Harden's on that team, he's one of the biggest floor raisers in the NBA. Him with a bunch of scrubs can win you enough games to be a 5-6 seed, in my opinion. I really believe in James Harden. I think the only reason he hasn't won a title is just because, if you look at all the series he's lost for the most part the last few years, he's run into the best team. He's lost to the eventual champion for the most part. He hasn't lost a series where he was favored. He just has less talent on his team. James Harden and Chris Paul aren't going to beat Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. And they almost did, just because of how great James Harden was and how well built that Rockets team was without having the same amount of talent. They were competitive with the Lakers through a few games this season, and then I don't know, something weird happened with that team with Daniel House and that whole situation. They just kind of fell apart at the back end of that series. It felt like they just stopped trying. In the beginning, the first two games of that series was very, very competitive. So, but I'm a believer in James Harden. I think he can win with the right cast. I don't think this necessarily is the right cast, but with the pieces that they have, I think they'll be good enough to be a playoff team.
Exactly, and that's what we just know. Well, Washington, at the other hand, that was a big pickup for Russell Westbrook. Maybe not from a financial standpoint because they gave up too much to get him, but let's not forget Russell Westbrook was the MVP at one point during his triple-double season, which is basically the most historic season Russell Westbrook has ever had. And if he could bring back that triple-double Russell Westbrook that we saw in 2017 onto the Washington Wizards, they're going to be back to the playoff team, but I can see them being like a 7 to 8 seed at best, just because of the fact that there's no way they're going to outlast teams like the Milwaukee Bucks or the Brooklyn Nets after what we talked about them earlier in the conversation. And you definitely can't compete with the Boston Celtics with that type of roster.
Yeah, I think they're more likely a 7th or 8th seed, as you said, maybe as high as 6. But I would say more likely 7 or 8. But I feel very comfortable saying that they'll be a playoff team if they stay healthy, because the other two teams, Atlanta invested a lot into that team this offseason with free agency. Danilo Gallinari came in, Bogdanovic, Rajon Rondo, Chris Dunn. They added some good pieces to Trae Young, Clint Capella, John Collins, all the young players they have like Cam Reddish. So they have a good roster too, and I think they're going to be the biggest contender with Washington for that 8th seed. At the end of the day, I'm going to lean on Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, and they have some good other pieces too. Davis Bertans, they just re-signed. He's a sniper out of the front court. Rui Hachimura is in the 2nd year now. He should be good. So they have some pieces. They just drafted Denny Adavia, if I'm saying his name probably wrong, but they just drafted him. He fell to them in the draft. So they got some talent. Thomas Bryant, Troy Brown Jr. They have some guys. I think I'm going to lean on the vets, Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, to sneak out that 8 seed.
And that's all it takes, because, well, you just got to see. You never know what's going to happen until the ball tips off. That's when you really know how teams are going to fare together. It's like what you said earlier in the conversation. Like, you never know what's going to happen until the game is played.
For sure. And we're all, at this point of the offseason, we're all projecting things at this point, but no one really knows. You have a good feel based on how we've seen these players play in prior seasons. But there's always the chance that young players blossom and got a lot better over the offseason. We had a longer offseason here for certain teams. So a guy like Trae Young, we haven't seen Trae Young since March. I mean, Trae Young, he's probably added a lot to his bag. He's going to be an improved player for the Hawks. So he's someone that can maybe lead a team into the playoffs. Even all these draftees, we haven't seen them play in months. We thought they were going to get drafted in June. It's now December. They got drafted just a month ago, not even a month ago. And they've probably added a lot of stuff to their game too with that whole offseason that we haven't seen. So young players and their progression, it's always hard to judge, but I feel confident making the projections I do.
Yeah, I feel confident as well. I mean, even in an unusual year where the NBA had to stop for 4 months, come back in the bubble, and then when the season's over, you get like 2 months to actually get ready for this season coming up. If you were to do the 2020 all over again without the global pandemic, rookies like an Obi Toppin or a James Wiseman or an Anthony Edwards or a LaMelo Ball would have developed a lot more going into the regular season, and you would have had the Olympics as well. Everything would have been a lot better, but right now you only get just a 2-week preseason just to like get adjusted to playing in the NBA game prior to December 22nd, which is the start of the season. So it's just you don't know what to expect at this point.
No, and I think for rookies also it's going to be tough. They didn't have a summer league this year, so they get a chance to get their feet wet with that. They haven't really been in these buildings with these teams for long. It's been a couple of weeks. And they're supposed to get comfortable being an NBA player, finding a place to live, all the new things that come with being a first-year player in the league. And they got to start the season less than a month later. I mean, that's a tough thing for these rookies. But, hey, you got to throw them into the fire. It's an unprecedented circumstance, and it's tough, but they got to get through it.
Well, all the questions will be answered when we get to the start of the season and the conclusion of the NFL season that we just asked. And, well, yeah, that'll conclude this episode of Nothing But That Sports Talk. Thank you for stopping by, Billy, and I appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work with the Nets Daily and Law School at Fordham University, and I know you're going to do a good job when you make it to the field.
I appreciate it, Rafique. Means a lot. Same to you. I'm excited about what's coming forward for you.
And to all the big balls out there, get your head in the game.